All right, well, welcome to the Indy.net Consortium. It's great to have everyone here. Tonight we've got our quarterly lightning talks. So, yay, Indy.net Consortium. I can change my intro slide. If you want to present tonight, so if you've never done a lightning talk before, lightning talks are just short, quick, topical conversations. So, hey, 2 to 10 minutes, just present on any topic you like within reason, and it can be really fun and interesting. Tonight we have 3 presenters, me included. We got Victor and Shane and myself. Victor will be talking about even faster parallel sorting in C#, infrastructure as a code, IAC with Terraform. Shane will be presenting on that, and I'll be talking about setting up an IOC container, dependency injection, and a .NET Core console app. Special thanks to our sponsors, Theoris, who, if we were meeting in person, would be providing pizza. Yay, Theoris. 1150 Academy, that's a non-for-profit coding boot camp that has been with us since the beginning. And also in the beginning, let us use our space. Doesn't apply today, just like with Launch Fishers, also lets us use their space, which is very nice of them. Doesn't apply today. Yay, COVID. And of course, Ozcode, which makes debugging awesome. So it does for debugging what ReSharper does for writing code. And like I always joke, it's not make it slow, it makes it awesome. So we're also brought to you by the .NET Foundation, which is really cool. They've got the .NET Foundation Virtual User Group. So I didn't actually advertise this one, although next time I will. Let's try and figure out how we're going to do lightning talks virtually, which is interesting because usually with a lightning talk, there's a board at the room and everybody writes their topics when they get there, which additionally motivates people to add more topics while they're presenting, while others present. Harder to do that here. So what I've done instead, if you take a look in the chat, there's a link to a Google form. So if you want to fill that out or just put something in the chat that you want to talk about it, we'll make sure that you're on the list to talk tonight too. And with that said, I hope you sign up for all of our upcoming presentations. We tend to keep that up to date. I know, Tim, you and I are going to be talking about that tonight while we talk about .NET Bourbon. Okay, I thought that was funny. All right, I'm here till Thursday. Try the veal. Thank you. So our first presenter tonight is Victor. Victor, I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter. So let me go ahead and stop presenting.
Sounds great.
And I will make you a presenter. Make a presenter. There we go. And then you should be able to present.
I can share my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to now.
Thank you.
And I will mute.
Let's see what I...
Real quick, Ari, would you mind relinking the form? Because people who have joined since you've linked it do not see that link.
Oh, they haven't seen it. I'm so sorry. Oh, yay. Thanks. Let me go. I got to go find. There we go. Copy. It's weird that it wouldn't show that. I would think that it would have shown it. There we go. It is there again.
I am sharing the screen.
Seeing it.
Am I sharing the screen? Can you guys see?
Yeah, I can see it. It's
Yeah.
your list of passwords. Yeah.
I see a browser with a plot at the bottom of it.
Yeah, it's a. Oh yeah, that's what that.
I like the password thing. That's pretty good. So what I'm going to talk about today is a NuGet package that I author called HPC Sharp for High Performance Computing Sharp in C#. It's open source. It's free. It's on NuGet.org. It has over 25,000 downloads now, about 27 a day. And like I said, it's all open source. It's all no royalties of any kind. It has pretty good documentation in there, but I'll focus on one of the aspects of it. Is kind of, I've talked before at this forum about, so basically what it focuses on is parallel algorithms. So use up all the cores. I have quite heavy hardware background, so it always kind of one of my passions is use the hardware to its fullest capacity. It's like, why not? It's there. Use it. Use all the cylinders of the engine instead of just one. So that's how at least I view software. So I've been programming in C# and C++. I actually have a repo in C++ as well. And I used to write a column for Dr. Dobbs' journal on parallel computing. So this one is kind of one of the areas is sorting is a really easy way to get into parallelism and explore parallelism. So what I'm showing right now is what my NuGet package has is a better version of parallel sort in C#. Like I said, I have an equivalent one in C++ as well, and I'll compare them and show you guys how it compares. It's neat to see the two languages and compare those two languages as well, because they're good cousins of each other. So what you're seeing is kind of a simplified table that I put together is in C# you have a couple of options, or we as developers have a couple of options on how to sort. One of them is array.sort, and that's what you're seeing. Array.sort is not multi-core, it runs on a single core. So that's what I'm showing. And 9, if you're sorting an array of 32-bit integers, it runs at about 9 million per second on a single core. And there's no as parallel version of it. There's no way to run it on multiple cores. So you're kind of stuck. Link has order by, and it has as parallel options. So when you say as parallel, then you can control how many cores you're running, or by default it runs on all the cores. That one, if you run it on a single core, runs at about 1 million per second. So it's about an order of magnitude slower. If you run it on 32 cores, it runs at about 7. So it does not scale that well. At least that's what I'm finding. Here's an array of integers. You should be able to sort way better than that. So what I put together is a merge sort, let's say, and it runs on a single core. It runs at 5 million integers per second. So it's about half the speed of array sort. The beauty of it is it uses a parallel merge algorithm that runs, the core of it is actually a parallel merge that runs across all the cores and knows how to merge a bunch of things together using all the cores and does it really efficiently. So underneath it, and it's recursive, and underneath it at leaf nodes, you can stick anything you want in it. So what I did is underneath it, I stuck array sort because that one is the fastest single core that we have. So on a 32 core machine, if you run that, it runs at about 293 million per second. So it's over 40x faster than doing it with Link. If you run on a 48 core, like an AWS or an Azure, it runs almost at 400. So it scales really well, basically scaling from 9, because that's what's at the core of it, to 397. The 48 core is the largest machine, one of the largest machines that AWS has. They call them 96 VPUs, but it's really a 48 core with hyperthreading. But it also has more memory channels than your typical machine, and things scale. So this algorithm scales really, really well. And if you look at the chart I kind of give below, is kind of the higher number the better, and the bottom graph is Link running on multi-core, and the top graph is the parallel running on the same machine. That shows kind of the scaling, and it also shows that it doesn't have to be really large arrays. And basically, one of the mechanisms that I came up with is how to scale parallelism. Basically, if the work is small, then you use one core if your arrays are small. If your arrays are bigger, then it starts scaling to more and more cores. And when your array size is big, then all the cores are used. And you as developer, can you guys still see me? Something is happening to my machine.
I can see you, but it
You're-
looks like the screen went blank. Oh, it's
It came back.
It was just processing so fast.
I think so.
I don't know.
I'm not seeing anything on my screen at all. Let me do this. So let's see if that'll reset it. Am I still there, or is it all gone now?
I still see your browser.
Still see it.
I see your mouse moving even.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you should write a NuGet package for that. I'm just kidding.
Am I still there?
Can you stop presenting? Do you want me to stop the presentation and then see if it comes back?
I think Teams has totally freaked out.
Oh no! Did Teams crash on you?
Let's.
Did we just lose Victor?
I don't hear a thing.
You're still there. You stopped presenting.
Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So anyways, that's kind of the crux of the talk. What I can do is show a little bit of code to show you. Let's see if I can share the screen again. Let's see. Okay, open share. This one. Yes. Okay, let me show you. Can you see my code at all?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
So here's kind of an example to make it more concrete. And this example is actually, this whole project is in the Git repository that the NuGet package points to. So it kind of shows you, here's an array sort that sorts the array that's above. So it's pretty easy to use. You can also tell it to do a subrange of it, to say start at an index and do a certain length. Here's an example, and it does it in place. If you use link, you lose the ability of being in place, since it's functional and it returns a new sorted array. But here's the usage of it, and here's kind of the usage of my merge sort. It also is not in place and returns one. If you want to compare kind of link usage to a merge sort, the parallel merge sort, it's very similar. It's pretty easy to use. You can also do a subrange. It has the same syntax as array sort, to where you can start at an index. You can give it the length. You can give your own comparison function, just like array sort. So you can sort not just arrays of integers, but arrays of anything. And it'll do it parallel. So think of the one that I put together as a parallel array sort. That's just super fast, uses all the cores really efficiently, uses the number of memory channels on the computer really well. But what you lose is the in-place ability, because my parallel merge is not in place. So you will have to, just like link, it'll return a new array as a result, a sorted array. So that kind of gives you an idea of that the code is not complex, that it's very similar syntax, just a replacement for or augment in the current algorithms. So that's it for my lightning talk. Anybody have any questions or?
I don't right now. It's always interesting.
I'm curious, what is the problem that the built-in array.sort runs into? Well, first of all, I guess it's not parallel as well, but the link dot parallel sort. What problems does it run into that doesn't allow it to scale that you've been able to tackle and tackle differently?
I'm guessing it has a much higher level of abstraction inside, and every level of abstraction costs you performance. So that's what I'm guessing that it's running into. That's what I found, at least in a couple of .NET high performance books that I kind of studied. I have not looked at the code that Link has, but that was one of the suggestions in one of the books from the Microsoft actually author, is he said, just remember that every level of abstraction, while it comes with less code, it comes with less performance.
Yeah.
And do you think it's the implementation of order by specifically, or do you think it's the combination of the order by with a parallel call?
I'm not sure. I'm guessing because sorting is really a lot of data movement, and maybe it's not really a lot of computation because it's really a permutation. So it really so somewhere something is not quite right in there, is in my opinion, or they didn't notice performance as well or didn't pay attention. Oh, I forgot to mention that the C++ versions of the same algorithm run about 50% faster, about 600 million on the same machines, the same setup. And C++ also has a parallel version of the sort, and it runs about the same speed as mine, which is a standard one that that the C++ 17 implemented. I'm working on even faster versions now.
So have you thought about, sorry, go ahead.
The beauty of it too is that if you're close to pre-sorted, then it runs even faster. You reach actually close to almost 1 billion elements per second of sorting. So if your stuff is nearly sorted, that's also, this one is, the example I gave is randomly sorted, or random data, I should say.
Cool. Hey,
and have you looked into what Unity does with C#? They use some subset of C# to get massively higher performance. Have you looked into what they do while tackling some of the space?
I have not, but by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is those benchmarks were in with .NET. Since my library runs on Linux as well, it's with .NET Core or on Windows or Linux, and this one in particular was run on Linux.
So have you thought about, now that .NET is open sourced, have you thought about just taking your code and suggesting, making it part of .NET?
Yeah.
You what? I'm sorry.
I have not yet looked at that at all.
It could be really interesting because then everyone would get your algorithms out of the box, right?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have not thought about that at all yet. And I actually have a faster copy as well, which is kind of interesting because like in C++, it's a parallel copy. You would think copy would be as fast as it can go. No, I can actually do about 3x faster and not use all the cores. You don't have to use all the cores. So even those kind of operations, and I know on C++ side, Microsoft and other people that contribute to the language have shied away from copies, even though they know they can be faster, but they just don't do them in parallel for some reason. But
I know one issue that they have with sorting. What is it? It doesn't end up in the proper order. There's something.
Stability. Yeah, it's called stable or not. If the two elements are the same, or they can swap them, right?
Right.
I have versions that are stable or not stable, and Link does too. You can actually say stable or not stable.
Oh, is that new now? Because I thought
it runs a little slower, but it can do stable, I believe. I think Link can. I don't think Array can.
You don't think what can?
Array.sort I don't think can.
Oh, okay.
I think it's unstable.
Interesting. Well, thanks for that presentation, Victor. Awesome. Way to go. Good job. Yeah. All right, Shane, I'm going to go ahead and make you a presenter now.
Woo.
Whoop, whoop.
Okay.
Yay.
Let me figure out how to share what I want to share. Okay. We see a web browser.
Yes.
Okay. So what I am here to talk about is infrastructure as a code, specifically using a software called Terraform. And this is free to use if you want the free version to use. So if you were to download this and use it, you would want the CLI. That would be the free version. If you want to pay them money and have a nifty cloud environment for working in a team that does some really cool stuff, you can pay them money for that as well. And that's what the Terraform cloud is. But what I'm going to be working with is the free version that is the CLI. So what is infrastructure as a code? Or as code? What that is really you scripting the provisioning of your cloud infrastructure. Just like you would automate a deployment with PowerShell scripts or what have you, if you're writing .NET code, you can likewise script your cloud infrastructure. If you worked in AWS or Azure, well, they both have their own native way to do this, and they're both very scriptable, but they're very different from one another. And Terraform is a platform that starts to provide an abstraction away from those native solutions, although behind the scenes it uses those native solutions. But it starts to provide an abstraction away, so that way you only have to learn one system, and that allows you to then script your provisioning of resources in Azure the same as you can in AWS or even GCP or Salesforce. There are a lot of providers that you can use to actually have this automate the provisioning of your infrastructure for you. What we're going to look at today, though, is specifically with Azure, and we are going to really jump into code real quick. So I'm logged into my portal real quick, and I'm showing resources in my solution right now that have IDNC, Indy.NET Consortium, and I have no resource groups in there with that in the name right now. So we're going to go actually create something there. So before we really get into what's going on here, I want to go over the things that I've done before actually running this code, so that way you can see the magic behind the curtains of what I've already done. So I've got a markdown file here showing everything I've done, and I'll get this up on GitHub later tonight for everybody. But all I've really done is I've hacked PowerShell to allow me to type TF instead of terraform.exe, just because I don't like typing. So I like typing TF instead. I've downloaded and installed the Azure CLI. I've downloaded and installed the Terraform CLI like I showed you in that web browser. I've used my Azure CLI to log into my subscription. I've picked my default subscription I want to work with, and now we're to the point where we're writing HCL. So there's not a whole lot of magic that's gone into here other than just installing stuff. And I did perform this Terraform init prior to what we're looking at today. So all we're really going to look at is starting at the step where you actually write your HCL. So HCL is this scripting language. It's kind of a combination of JSON and YAML kind of having a baby. White space matters, but it's not quite JSON, but you still get curly braces. It's a little bit of a mix of the two. In this case, everything that I have at the bottom is commented out. So there's nothing happening below what we're looking at right here. Right now, this is all the script that I have that we're going to look at first. So what this is doing is I've got this file called main.tf. Nothing else is important in my directory structure. All I have is main.tf. That's the only thing important. And in here, I say I'm using a provider. That's an Azure Resource Manager. Like I said, you can use this against AWS, and it would just use a different provider. It would say AWS something or other up there. And so in this case, I'm saying I'm using the Azure Resource Manager provider. I want to use something that's at least version 2.0. I can lock that down to a very, very specific version, or I can use Semver like comparison and say it's okay to upgrade a little bit, but not too much. If I don't specify a version at all, I think it will always get the latest version. And I'm going to say, great, now that I've got my provider, I want to go create a resource group. I'm going to give it a variable name inside of my script of RG. I wanted to name my resource group this ID NC Demo 1. I wanted to go in East US, and because I'm a good infrastructure management person, I put tags on my things. So we've got only about 5 lines of interesting scripting language here, and I'm going to now go into my command, my PowerShell window down here at the bottom, and I'm going to do nothing more than type tf plan. And what this is going to do is it's going to take a look at what I've actually got in Azure, which I showed you before. I have nothing with IDNC in the name as a resource group, but we're trying to create IDNC demo 1 as a resource group. And when I type tf plan, it's going to look at what I've got in Azure, look at my script, and tell me what it thinks it needs to do based on the script. And here you see it's got a little plus sign, so it's going to go create this resource group. So I'm going to say tf apply. And it's going to do the exact same thing. It's actually going to do that same comparison again and say, hey, are you sure? I'm going to say, yes, I am sure. And now it's starting to go build this resource group for us in the cloud. And it's done. Now, if you're very familiar with Azure, you know that when you create things, sometimes, even though it says it's done, you might have to wait a minute. And for just creating a resource group, if I were to click here, sit here, clicking refresh for about a minute, it would pop up. I'm going to go away and come back to code for now. And before we actually run anything else, we'll go click refresh one more time to make sure that's actually ran. Now I've got some more stuff here. I'm going to comment out real quick. And what I'm going to do is, now that I've got a resource group, I want to create some local variables just to hold a few pieces of information. I've got some identifiers. I've got East US as a variable. I've got some IP stuff for whitelisting, because we're going to be creating a database with a randomly generated password, and I want to be able to access these things. And then lastly, this is a GUID representing my AAD user, so that way I can grant myself permissions to access this generated password. So we're going to create a resource for a password. We're going to create a resource, and by the way, a resource is a Terraform representation of a thing in the cloud. It's almost like a variable that represents a thing in the cloud. In this case, this thing in the cloud is a password, and it doesn't really exist in the cloud. This is almost just saying var, string foo equals randomly generated password. That said, that randomly generated password will be it will be a predictable value that gets generated. And so that way, if I run this over and over and over, it will not generate new random values. It will be the same random value. If I want to generate a new one, there's some different ways to do that with properties here. But at this point, this is essentially a random password, and then we're going to later put it into a key vault that we're going to provision down here. I'm going to set some network ACLs to say who can and cannot access secrets in my key vault. I'm going to set some permissions. This stuff is all boring. But you can see in here where I am going to loop through my admin user IDs, which I created up here at the top, this GUID right here, and I just have one admin user. But we're going to loop through our admin user IDs and give them all of these permissions to access keys in the key vault. And once we have our key vault, we're going to come down here, we're going to create a SQL server with a database, and that's the end. So this is not necessarily the simplest of possible infrastructure we could provision, but it's also not quite the most complex either. But there's definitely some complexity in there where we're not just spinning up a server with nothing running, we're actually provisioning a database server. We're configuring that database server and the database size, and even generating very secure means to authenticate to that with randomly generated passwords for the admin user and everything. Now, we're actually going to get an error, and that's one of the things I want to show you here. In SQL Azure, you can't just use the name admin. So we're going to see what an error looks like and what we do with that. So before I actually run this, let me hop back over to the portal and refresh just for good measure to see that, okay, our resource group finally popped up there. So what we're going to do now that we have uncommented all this code, we're going to do a tf plan again. And this is going to show us everything that it thinks we need to do based on the current status of the cloud and our script here. So it takes us just a few seconds, and then bam, we've got a lot more now that it's going to do. And if you were to look through this, it would look just like everything we looked at in our code. We're creating key vault, we're setting a lot of permissions, putting in a password in there, and then we're going to create our database server with a database inside of it. Now remember, when it gets to the point where it's creating that database, it is going to fail. So let's do a tf apply. And one more thing I want to point out, if we look at this list of things it's going to do, you would actually, if you inspect it closely, you would notice that it is not going to be recreating that resource group that we had already created. It already exists in the cloud, so it knows it does not need to create it again. I did a tf apply. We're going to say yes. And this is going to take a couple minutes. So while this is taking a couple minutes, I actually want to jump into this code just a little bit more while we let it do its thing. And I'm going to try to keep an eye out for the error when it's going to pop up at the bottom so we can take a look at what's going on there. So I said before, this is like JSON, but as you know, JSON has a whole lot of strings and quotes, and it doesn't have equal signs, and it also doesn't have things like variables in them. This has an almost obvious one-to-one mapping to JSON. You get rid of all of your commas, you get rid of your colons, you replace them with equals. You have non-strings as your values, as your keys, and you can actually have you can have non-values, but actually variables for the thing that you're setting things to. In this case, our key vault, we are saying that it is inside of a resource group with the name this thing right here. Well, what is this thing right here? This thing right here is that resource group we created up here, and it's actually pulling the name off of that. So this does two things. First of all, it keeps me from having to type the name or copy and paste the name all over the place. But the other more useful thing that it does is it sets up a dependency chain. It says, hey, I know this key vault is going in this resource group. That means I cannot create this key vault until I am done creating this resource group. So it allows all of our different resources in here to have a dependency hierarchy, and it reorders things slightly differently than what my code has to make sure that we don't violate that dependency. So when we did that TF plan and actually looked at the output there, you probably noticed that things were in a different order than what they were here. The plan is more closely representative of the order it's actually going to create the things in, regardless of the order that my script here has the things in there. So it can kind of clean up and walk back that dependency chain, make sure everything gets created in the proper order. So we're creating some things down here. It looks like right now it's creating the key vault, and bam, we just got an error. The error is invalid login name for admin, just like we expected. So first of all, let's go fix our code. So I'm going to delete that, and I've got a better admin username here. But before we do anything, let's go take a look again in the portal. So refresh here. We now have two different resource groups, just because in our code here, we're actually creating two different resource groups. I've got this resource group here I'm creating, and then I've got another resource group down here. And in this case, I'm using one to put the key vault in, and I'm using the other to put the database in. So that's why I've got a couple in there. No real strong reason other than to say, hey, I can build these out and organize them however I want to or need to. So once we hop into the one without the hyphen in the name, we can look and see what all's been created, which is nothing. Now we can look in this other one and see what all's been created. Well, we do have our key vault. So pretty much what our script is building out are these resource groups, a key vault, and a database server with a database inside of it. Our database stuff failed because of the admin username. So that's why we're seeing the key, not the database. So we have a partially successful run until it hits this error. So what happens is it doesn't walk that back. But if you fix your script and run it again, you can do that TF apply, which does the TF plan. We're just going to save a step here and do TF apply and inspect it. And we're going to see that it's not going to try to recreate that key vault. It's going to use that key vault that's already in place, that already has a password in it. We can go look in that key vault real quick and go look at its secrets and see that we do have a password in there. So it's going to take that, and it's going to say, okay, great. The only things that we're going to create is our database and our database server. So that's easy. So yes, that's what I want you to do. So it recovers as you clean up your code and fix problems. So it's something that's actually pretty easy to iterate through and work with as you're flushing things out, building out your infrastructure as in your scripts for that infrastructure. And the neat thing is that it also has a thing called TF state, Terraform state, where it actually tracks the state of what has been done, and so that way, if I were to delete some of this HCL, for example, if we completed this and then I were to come back in and comment this out or delete it, the database server and the database itself, and I did a TF apply, that TF apply would actually know that it needs to remove that database server and database from the infrastructure. So it's very adaptive, and there are ways to share that state across a team. Right now, I'm doing just because I've got a single file implementation, everything is stored locally, but there are ways to get that up in Azure storage so it can be shared with file locks and everything to keep that in a pristine, keep it pristine without it being corrupted with multiple people making changes to it simultaneously. So right now we see that it's creating things. It has already successfully created a server, and now it looks like it's creating the database. So while it's doing that, we're going to hop over here one more time. And if it's going to refresh our resources quickly enough, it's not. Oh, hey, I put my server in the wrong resource group. So we do have a server in here now that's been created. Let's see if its databases are there. Hey, I do have a database there. It looks like it's still wrapping it up, so it's not going to quite work yet. But at that point, once it's done running, I would be able to log into this and everything. And since I've got my key vault, I can go in there and get my password from the secrets, go in there. Remember, I gave myself permission to access this. Had I not done that, I wouldn't be able to show my super secret database password here, but there you go. And I would be able to use that with SQL Management Studio to access my database once it's all said and done. And then I'm not going to go ahead and go through that, but one thing I do want to show you is now that we've built all this up, there's one more really, really handy command, TF destroy. And that pretty much takes everything we just built and it blows it up and removes it from the subscription and everything. So that way it's as if we never did any of this work. So it's a very handy way to kind of prototype and build things out and know what you did. First of all, know what you built out, know what you did. Your scripting, your HCL tracks everything you did, but then also a one-liner to also make it go away so I don't accidentally leave a $10,000 per month database server running out there in the cloud.
It's only money.
Anybody have any questions on that?
That seems really interesting. So you're using this often?
Yes and no. I'm not necessarily the person who's writing this. That said, I am leveraging it often.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much every project we work on is some kind of cloud project, and we use this to essentially have a source controlled version of what we build in the cloud from an infrastructure standpoint. And then that lets us have higher confidence that our dev environment, our test environment, our QA environment, our production environment, or example, one of our clients has 50 identical duplicate production environments. It gives us higher confidence that they're all provisioned identically. Mm-hmm. And then also lets us more easily manage 50 identical production environments.
Oh, okay. So is there a UI for it? Because it looks like something that would be an ideal candidate to kind of graph out everything that you're doing. So you could.
That's where if you want to pay them money, you can sign up for their cloud version and they'll give you some UI stuff.
Okay. Is it any good?
I've never paid them money to use UI stuff. I've always used the CLI stuff because ultimately what we want is we want this script in source control. That's kind of our number one need is something we can source control, version, change track versions to, share, and rerun with slightly differently configured tweaks to it.
Gotcha.
The UI is kind of secondary to us, and just being able to have the source controllable scripted infrastructure is our #1 need. So that's why we've just stuck with CLI. It's free and that covers our primary need. Great.
Yeah.
The cloud stuff, we're kind of dependent on them to take care of source control, and we have a little bit less access to things, and it's just not something we've actually, well, at least not something that I've been a part of actively going through to truly evaluate, because it kind of seems like it just doesn't make any sense at all for us to use. Some people, it probably makes a lot of sense to use, but not us.
Sure, that's fair. Does anyone else have any questions? And if you're asking a question, you're muted, or just put it in the chat.
And there, all of our resource groups are blown away now from that TF destroy. So I'm done cleaning up from my demo presentation tonight.
Come on.
How often do you find yourself updating the scripts once you get started on a project?
It depends on the project. So if it's a brand new project, you're creating something from scratch. If the client doesn't have any kind of cloud infrastructure that you're building on top of, but you're kind of provisioning the resources, the networking, the VMs, the storage, whatever, a lot while you're initially iterating through and building out that infrastructure. Have it in place, then not very often at all. It just really depends on what part of the project you're working on, what you're iterating on. If all I need is a web application with a database, the first week of that project, there might be a lot of changes to the script and some churn to the infrastructure. But after that first week, there's not a whole lot of the infrastructure changing. So at that point, this script will mostly sit idle until we start to provision higher level environments. Now, flip side, some projects, I've had the need to take a multi-tenant database, a multi-tenant application, and extract that single application out to, like I said, 50 identical production environments. So it became 50 different single tenant applications. Almost that entire project was working with this kind of scripting language and DNS.
Matt's asking if you've tried the Terraform graph command.
The Terraform what?
Graph command.
I have seen, I've not personally used it, no. What does it do? Is that something I should try right now?
I've never tried it either, but it sounds like that's a way you can graph, like pH. Sounds like it's a way to generate a diagram of your environment.
Oh, is that it? Are you sure?
I think that's a text-based version of the diagram.
Yeah, it sounds like you got to feed that through another program like GraphViz or something to actually get the diagram.
I see.
I put the link to the docs on that command in the chat.
I don't know what this dot thing is. We'll see if this works. No, okay, I don't know what that dot thing is.
I think it's some other program you got to install.
Probably. That's neat. Yeah, I have not used that before. I'd be almost afraid to look at what that would produce for certain things. we use a system called Lucid Charts that actually has the ability to connect to an Azure subscription and kind of generate graphs for what's up in there already for you, and then you can go and tweak that. So that's the tool that we've used in the past for graphing cloud-based. That's neat.
Cool.
And then Terraform will work with any cloud provider?
I'm sorry, what is the question?
Does Terraform work with any cloud provider? Then it's across providers.
So let's look at that real quick. you can go look and see what the providers are. And like I said, it definitely works with AWS and Azure. I'm not sure who manages the AWS provider plugin. I know there are folks at Microsoft who actually manage the Azure provider plugin, but it works with anything that there's a provider for. So they've got breakdowns for major cloud, which is pretty generous in what they're calling a major cloud here. They've got just cloud, which there's a lot more that goes into this, and they're not all even AWS or Azure competitive, but there's a lot that you can orchestrate with Terraform, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just a cloud provider. There can be some. There we go. You can automate stuff with GitHub, for example, or with 1Password. That's not even a cloud provider of any. That's just a tool, right? So there's a lot of things that you can use Terraform for. I've never used it for anything besides Azure and AWS. So I can't speak too much about all these other things. I've used Azure DevOps with it too. I'm in a project that's going to start using this pretty heavily, I think. But all of these other things I can't really speak to other than there's a lot of stuff here, and I bet you there's some neat stuff going on that a lot of people have done some cool things. I just don't know what it is.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Shane. Great job. Woohoo! I'm going to get started here in just a moment. Okay, here we go. Yay. Now I just got to find the right window. Great. All right. So if you've used ASP.NET Core, you've probably noticed that it has a built-in IOC container. It's just, you just bring in this NuGet package, you get an IOC container, so you get dependency injection in ASP.NET Core, and it's all just kind of like ready to go in your services. You can just say services.create scope. It's all ready to go for you. And it's super simple. It's just there. It's rolled in. And I love it. I love that it's just kind of built in. I mean, even though you have to bring in the particular, oh, that's crazy. Teams just started telling me that my video is spotlighted and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are all these messages? I've never seen them before. What's wrong? What's wrong? Did I lose my internet connection? Anytime I see a bunch of things that say dismiss, I think something's wrong. So anyway, it's very useful. But the problem is once you step outside of that nice sandboxed or kind of templated environment that you get when you choose the ASP.NET Core web application template, how do you access that container? So let's say I want to build a .NET Core console application. How do I access that IOC container? It's not there. Like out of the box, I just have the .NET Core libraries. I can't just say services.add scope, etc. So that's quite annoying, because if you want to do, there's a number of things. Obviously, IOC itself is great, right? I mean, you can code with intent. You can inject the implementations. You can quickly swap out your implementations as time goes on without breaking your code. It's just more bulletproof. It's easier to understand. It's easier to architect things. Everything is great. And there's 100 other platforms out there, for IOC. Microsoft doesn't have the best one. You've heard of Unity. There's Simple Injector. There's Ninject. There's a whole bunch of them. But the thing with .NET Core, and specifically ASP.NET Core, is this is what you get pre-configured out of the And if you use Entity Framework, you're kind of ready to go. If you got an ASP.NET Core application, you can, using the built-in IOC and the built-in template, you're all set. You know, your Entity Framework stuff will kind of just work because it injects a configuration into the context, which has all your database configuration details in it, and now suddenly you have database access. But what if you want to use Entity Framework in a console application? How do you do it? So over the course of some time, I couldn't find one single article about how do you use the .NET Core IOC container from a console app. I had to piece together a bunch of different articles from Microsoft to just get a walkthrough of how to do it. So I wanted to share that with you tonight. It's not complex, but I wanted to explain to you how frustrating it was, because there's a clear advantage. If out of the box, when I build an API, or pardon me, ASP.NET Core web application that's got an API or what have you, and I've configured everything using .NET Core's IOC container, well, why wouldn't I use that in any of my utility applications and use the same container? What about my Xamarin applications, which use .NET Core? Why wouldn't I use the built-in container? Why would I use like one IOC solution for, and if you don't know what IOC is, it's inversion of control, DI is dependency injection, they go hand in hand. It would be stupid, I think, to use, let's say, Unity in one, you know, the ASP.NET Core IOC host in another, and then maybe Simple Injector in yet another. That's just a lot of overhead. It's a lot of why did you make that decision for something that really has minimal impact. So let's keep it simple. And now with .NET Core, I can kind of stick myself into this, Microsoft ecosystem, and just kind of stick in there, which is great. So let me show you. Let me give you an example, a visual. Yay! If I can find that. Boop, 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 boop. Screen one, screen two. So in a typical AS.NET application, you'll see in configure services. And it's right there, ready to go, because all the IOC stuff is kind of bootstrapped as part of program.cs. Everything's built in, and then this gets called to configure your services. Yay, that's wonderful. But I have no such thing built into my console application. So here you can see, here's how I add my DB context. Here's how I add a singleton. So I add a geolocation service. I can just say, hey, services, add singleton. Look how great this is, just built into ASP.NET Core. It's all there and ready to go. Well, that doesn't, like I said, that doesn't work in a console application. This is all part of ASP.NET Core. So how do you do it? The cool thing is it's as simple as adding a few NuGet packages and understanding how this works. So I'm just going to show you so that you can copy and paste some code, because that's sometimes the best thing. So let me find, you can see my typical configuration here. I can close all these. You don't have to see all my fun stuff. This is an app I'm currently working on. So I've got this data importer app. And in dataimporter.cs, and then I've got a, I've got program.cs. Hold on, here we go, program.cs. Here we go. So in main, I obviously have my configuration builder, but there's two things that you have to do in order to get access to the IOC container after you've added the appropriate extension, or probably NuGet packages. So you got to add Microsoft extensions.hosting, which will give you access to host builder. And the host builder creates a host that lets you go ahead and configure all your services. Ooh. So here's where you're configuring all your dependencies. And if you've ever used a container before, this should look really simple. So so you can support Entity Framework, yay, because if you've ever done a .NET Core application with Entity Framework, whenever you're working with this stuff, it requires, it injects a particular configuration. So if we take a look, let's see, here we got our context. It sticks in all the options. So this takes care of all that for you. So you can do it just like you do in your ASP.NET Core applications. I add my configuration so that I can inject that, which is the config that's already been created. All my other singletons. So my mentee and mentor services, this is for the youth mentoring initiative. And then of course my data importer service. And my data importer service, following what I feel is my best practices. Let me find my data importer service. Oop, boop, boop, boop. I gotta go to F12. I just have something very simple in here. It only does one thing, import. Very simple. By the way, something new, I think this is .NET, was it .NET, what's C#7? I think it's C#7. I gotta remember the exact version. You can now have an asynchronous main. So if you've never seen that before, this is really cool. No more getawaiter.getResult. So anyway, very cool. There's another one you might want to check out if you haven't seen it, but I'll talk about it in a moment, called Dragon Fruit. Very neat thing. But anyway, here you go. You create your host builder. You get your service host that hosts the all the services. So all you have to do then, after you have the host, which has your configuration, is you create a scope. Oh, hold on. There, I double-clicked. I right-clicked. And now, within this scope, you're all squared away. You can use a service locator, get the importer, but now everything's been registered within this scope. So now when you call importer.import, everything's been injected into this instance. And now you can just start your whole process. You know, everything going forward will be properly injected from that point on. So the keys are, get this Microsoft extensions.hosting, plus any other extensions that you may need, like for configuration and such. There's an extension for environment variables and command line and so forth. So get your builder, then get your scope, look up your initial service, and then you're all set. So if you've never had to do that, if you've been wondering how to do this, I hope this unsticks you, because it was a pain in the butt on looking it up and getting a single answer. And then, so number one, and number two, doing it in a readable fashion. That was one really, there's other examples out there, but this was clean. It's like, okay, I get my config, I get my builder, I get my service host and my scope, and then I kick off the application and I'm done. Everything else works as it should, just like in my ASP.NET Core application. And I'm excited about that. So I hope that helps you. One other thing I mentioned that sounded really cool that I want to try. And because it's a lightning talk, I can talk about anything. Okay, so this I want to try. I don't know if has anyone ever written a console application and been really annoyed, well, in particular by this? Like, what are all the arguments? This is so stupid. And then you have to write your own command line parser, which I have done, and that sucks. Like, sometimes, what if they had quotes in there? What if they have equals? What if they have spaces? What if they screw up? how do you solve this nightmare? Well, enter dragon fruit, which lets you do this. So if you've ever wanted to write a console application that has command line arguments, and you don't want to have to write your own parser, go get dragon fruit. And apparently it just takes care of this stuff for you.
Will it also support an async main?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know why it wouldn't, actually. Because really, I'll bet async main is just a wrapper that does get await or get result. I wouldn't be surprised if behind the scenes that's all they're doing, and it's just some syntactic sugar that says, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we're gonna totally just kick off a non-asynchronous main, because what are you returning control to? Right? I mean, async it's a state machine, right? If you're starting at the beginning of a command line application, what UI are you returning control back to? I mean, it's not like Linux where you're saying Control S, right? And then, you're coming back to a command prompt while that thing's paused in the background and running things. You're just you're just returning back to PowerShell or DOS if you think that still exists. So, yeah, that's my guess. I haven't looked at the code, but the cool thing about .NET, these days is we could just go look at how they did it. Anyway, I hope someone learned about that. Any questions about what I just presented? No? None? Cool. All right. I think that's all of our presentations tonight. Let me see what we got.
I do have a question.
Uh-oh.
Who is number 10 over your left shoulder? Your other left. There you go.
Really? You don't know who that is?
I can't tell. I can't even tell what team it is.
Well, I'll give you a hint. They're brothers.
Okay.
Who
The
is
right
it?
side, I just see a glare, so I now know what's on the right side too. I just see left side of number 10.
Yeah, the right side's is Peyton Manning, and then the left side is
Elijah.
And that's the two. They're both autographed after they both won Super Bowls back to back
Oh, cool.
with their individual Super Bowl coins.
Nice.
I thought that was just a really cool thing that they, two brothers won back to back. That's what a cool thing to talk about, Of course, Peyton was going after Rex Grossman, so whatever. I'm trying to see, did anyone have any other presentations to do? No. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentations. We tend to do the quarterly lightning talks. Well, quarterly. I'll be posting this video online in the next couple days. And please check us out online. Come to our future meetups, and feel free to look at our channel and view all of our previous presentations. Thanks for coming, and be safe.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ari. Have a good night.
Yay. Bye.
Have a good night.
Now I get to stop recording somehow.